Hello, welcome to an adventure. Uh, I am Anthony Wright Day Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist at Virginia Tech, and also known, here on Twitch as Rogan27. And this is the once a week show that we dive into archival documents and just, kind of see what's there and learn together. And yeah, hi. Hopefully you're all having a great day so far. I see Key Squared, I see Hannah. Anybody else? Hello as well. It is incredibly warm. We are still under the heat dome, so yeah, it's warm. If I get spacey, it's because of the heat. Anyway, how are you all doing? I think Hannah, maybe the heat has broken for you. I hope. I do not enjoy being up around triple-digit Fahrenheit. Let's see. Yeah. So Archival Adventures, we're going to be looking at some historic documents, and those documents are owned by Virginia Tech. So we do like to just acknowledge the history of the institution before we dive in. Still hot there, but at least there's ice cream. That is a good perspective. I will probably treat myself to some sort of frozen beverage after the stream because it's already hot enough in my office, and I'll have to go outside where it is at least 20 degrees warmer. So, Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutelo and Monacan people's homeland. We recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands in California and other areas in the West. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations, owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. Enslaved Black people generated resources that financed Virginia Tech's predecessor institution, the Preston and Olin Institute, and they also worked on the construction of its building. So today we're going to be diving into some local Black history. It should be a little interesting. We'll learn some things. The heat broke for you. You had storms on Monday night and Tuesday. They're predicting storms here for like the next 4 days. And that's fine as long as it breaks the heat. The storms we had over the last month, though, didn't break the heat. They just brought extra humidity, which my sinuses have really not enjoyed. So today we're going to be looking at the Piedmont Tuberculosis Sanatorium. I cannot recall if we have glanced at this in the past or not. I know we didn't do like an entire stream on it for sure, but I've worked enough with this collection in the past. I'm familiar enough with its existence that I just have no idea whether we've looked at it on stream before or not. And as you can see here in the title, Piedmont Tuberculosis Sanatorium, Burkeville, Virginia collection, because Burkeville is where it was located. So we're gonna have to talk about vocabulary a little bit at the start, but let's look at the administrative history. The Piedmont Tuberculosis Sanatorium was a hospital open to African American patients in order to treat tuberculosis from 1917 to 1965. Shortly after the sanatorium opened, a 2-year school for training African American nurses was opened, and it closed in 1960. In 1967, the institution became the Piedmont State Hospital, offering psychiatric treatment as well as medical treatment for chronic lung diseases. It moved from the State Department of Health to the State Department of Mental Hygiene and Hospitals. It eventually became the Piedmont Geriatric Hospital, offering mental health services to patients over the age of 64. It's a part of the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services now. I did not realize that it had remained in operation, so we'll glance at that page. Or not. That link appears to be broken. So it looks like we've got some administrative papers, including some brief histories, which should hopefully be useful. Bulletins, papers published by the staff. There's also newspaper clippings. Adventures in a Wheelchair. That might be something we need to look at. And then there's some pictures. If I remember correctly, I had somebody, a researcher, I think, that was interested in learning more about the education, like early education of Black medical professionals in Virginia. And I think that's part of why I remember this collection existing. Yeah. That, where it pointed, is not there anymore. So let's see just what a general internet search gives us. There's a Wikipedia article. Ah, there we go. This is the site that was trying to be linked from the finding aid and apparently has moved. So I will need to make sure that that gets updated. Piedmont Geriatric Hospital. History. Circa 1918, Piedmont Sanatorium. We'll look at stuff in the actual collection. I just wanted to show that there is some history online for it. I think, though, what we need is to talk about definitions. Vocabulary. We'll try Wiktionary this time. We do various dictionaries, but okay, so it points us towards sanitarium. This is not giving me what I was hoping for. It's interesting. It does dive into etymology, but that's not what I want. Yeah, I can't I don't remember us doing it. It's just that I remember the collection enough from previous interactions with it that I wasn't sure. Okay. Dictionary.com to the rescue. Sanatorium. Plural. Sanatoriums or sanatoria. A hospital for the treatment of chronic diseases as tuberculosis or various nervous or mental disorders. 2. Sanitarium. Sanitarium is an institution for the preservation or recovery of health, especially for convalescents, a health resort. The issue the confusion that I'm trying to make sure that we avoid is what is the sanitarium. It didn't show up as the definition in here, but sanitarium is like the term that gets used in reference to like mental institutions. Here they just define it as preservation and or recovery of health, especially for convalescents, a health resort. But it definitely has in the past had that like the mental institution meaning to it. That is not what the sanitarium that we will be looking at was for. It's not like the type of facility that you would see in like the movie One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest or any of those other kinds of like there's the horror trope of the patient who's not insane who gets sent to the sanitarium and treated as though they are insane, and that whole storytelling trope. It is not that kind. This one is a tuberculosis sanatorium. Yeah. Hi, Bastion Cider. And as we know, everything is tuberculosis. Okay, so let's talk about tuberculosis. Because, and I go to Wikipedia because generally for a good primer, like just general introductory information on general topics, it tends to be pretty good. We have talked about tuberculosis not that long ago, actually, when we were looking at the Peltz Journal, the Civil War Journal. Tuberculosis, TB, also known colloquially as the White Death, or historically as consumption, is a contagious disease usually caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacteria. Tuberculosis generally affects the lungs, but it can also affect other parts of the body. Most infections show no symptoms, in which case it is known as inactive or latent tuberculosis. A small portion of latent infections progress to active disease that, if left untreated, can be fatal. Typical symptoms of active TB are chronic cough with blood-containing mucus, fever, night sweats, and weight loss. Infection of other organs can cause a wide range of symptoms. It is spread from one person to the next through the air when people cough, spit, speak, or sneeze, but only transmitted by people with an active infection, not a latent infection. it goes through other stuff, but tuberculosis has been present in humans since ancient times. Curious. Oh, an article from The Lancet. It's the citation there. In the 1800s, when it was known as consumption, it was responsible for an estimated quarter of all deaths in Europe. The incidence decreased during the 20th century with improvement in sanitation and the introduction of drug treatments, including antibiotics. However, since the 1980s, antibiotic resistance has become a growing problem, with increasing rates of drug-resistant tuberculosis. It is estimated that 1/4 of the world's population have latent TB. Best Insider, congrats! You were randomly selected as VIP for the stream. Enjoy your digital gemstone and the ability to punish people with pun points. Or award them, you know, and they don't have to be a punishment, but wow. In 2023, TB is estimated to have newly infected 10.8 million people and caused 1.25 million deaths, making it the leading cause of death from an infectious disease. That's WHO reports. Huh. There's a whole Wikipedia article on the history of tuberculosis. Interesting. Well, if we need to return to this, we know where it is. You will abuse this power? Good. I encourage abuse of the meaningless point power. Not that the power is meaningless, that the points are meaningless, because we award them for anything. I mean, they're not meaningless. They're fun. So we do have the box. The pun points function roughly the same way as the points from the old British television show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? The number of points awarded and for what are completely arbitrary. And the points don't actually get you anything other than recognition. Everything is made up and the points don't matter? That's not what I'm saying at all. Just cross my fingers while I say that. All right. Looks like the first. Yes. Oh, that's right. Oh gosh, it's been forever. It has been ages since I watched Whose Line, but yes, I do remember that. That is a direct quote from Whose Line Is It Anyway? Okay, I have digressed. This first folder is a brief history of Piedmont Tuberculosis Sanatorium. Variations. I love the folder label actually says variations at the end. So we have multiple different versions of it, apparently. Okay. So according to the note left by Jules, it's the same document, but with updated info and numbers over time. So we don't necessarily need to look at all of them. You have so many tuberculosis facts swimming around in your brain. Oh, because of John Green's new book. I was unaware of a new book. Oh, that's why you said everything is tuberculosis. Because that is the title of said new book. I did not know of this book. I missed the arrival of said book. I have been very informationally overwhelmed lately. I will say, tuberculosis news, not exactly something I generally pay tons of attention to, but I am intrigued that you stay up to date on new tuberculosis news. For me, when I think tuberculosis, the first thing I think of is the movie Moulin Rouge. Because there's a depiction of someone with consumption. Let's see. Okay, this report, mostly through John Green for you, for the year July 1st, 1951 through June 30th, 1952. So that's relatively later in the existence. I'm going to look and see what dates we have. 52 to 53. We've got some onion skin paper. I don't know exactly when that's from. Very brief history, April 1918 through June 1948. I'm curious about where I'm looking to see. I'm just glancing at the beginnings of them right now to see which one we want to dive in on, because there are variations. But now I'm curious. Where did we get this? Apparently we bought it. I do not know who collected it. See, now I'm curious. I wonder if we'll be able to figure out like who created some of these documents. Let's start here. A very brief history of Piedmont Sanatorium, Burkeville, Virginia, April 1918 through June 1948. And by very brief, they mean 5 pages. This was written in February of 1949, and all I know about the author is their initials, ECD. We'll have to see if we can figure out who ECD was. Prior to 1918, the only place a Black person suffering with tuberculosis could receive treatment in Virginia was the Central State Hospital for the Insane, or in the state penitentiary. A condition which caused the late Dr. Enion G. Williams, state health commissioner, much concern. Therefore, when approached in 1915 by members of the Black organization Society of Virginia, the late Major Allen Washington and Dr. Robert W. Moten of Hampton Institute and T.C. Walker, attorney at law, Gloucester, Virginia, regarding the situation, Dr. Williams and Miss Agnes D. Randolph, director of the Educational Department of the State Board of Health, launched an intensive publicity program to interest the people of Virginia of both races interesting terminology there, in making some provisions for the fast increasing number of cases of tuberculosis among Black people. It was evident then, as it is now, tuberculosis must be treated in both races at the same time if the disease is to be abolished in our state. Okay, let's just mention historical terms. My friend who works in a museum in North Carolina gave me a primer on museum accreditation yesterday and problems with how some museums acquire materials. So now you're just imagining all the unsavory ways you could have acquired this. I mean, we acquired this by purchasing it from a seller. That's all I know. I could dig into it if I really needed to know, but there are various like auction houses, etc., that gather and sell historic documents. And so a lot of our stuff, we just find it at auction and buy it. We also have stuff that is donated to us. But yeah, like when it says purchased, especially we bought it in 2018, we bought it from one of the auction houses. I'm certain there are, I mean, we have stuff that we don't know how we got it because at points in the past there was an area in the library that had a bunch of stuff that was not yet processed, that had been acquired by previous employees, and eventually at some point, Kira, who has co-hosted on here with me a few times, went through that space and cleared it out, like identified what was there, but not all of it had the paperwork, so we don't know how we got it. We just know we have it. And so there are collections that just say, the finding aid would say, this collection was acquired by Special Collections prior to such and such date. And that's because that's all we know. We don't know, did we buy it? We don't know, was it donated? We just know it was there before that date. The sketch corner, yeah. So, well, and then there are other things like we found materials for an exhibit. Sterling found materials for an exhibit last year, and some of those materials had been placed into some big drawers because they were like oversized flat items. And they were put there because that's how they needed to be stored. But at some point between when we got them and when Sterling located them for use in the exhibit, they had become detached from any identifying markers saying what collection they belong to. I have theories. Some of them most of them I managed to identify, and it wasn't a big deal. I even found the original donation form for one of them. But there's one that I just created a new record for it, and it just says acquired by Special Collections prior to 2024, because I have no idea what collection it... Well, I cannot prove what collection it's a part of. I suspect that I'm like 80% sure that I know what collection it belongs to, but 80% is not enough. So we have it. That's all I know. Because I can't say for sure that it is from that collection, but that's my best guess. So instead of guessing, we just, hey, we have this. I paused, though, because I think it's quite interesting. The terminology, the phrasing here. It appeared one day in this box. Yes. It was found in the archives. Oh, we discovered this in the archives. When researchers say that, it's frustrating because they discovered it by using the finding aids and the search tools that we made so that people could find it. If an archivist says, we found this and we don't know where it came from, that could be considered a discovery. But when a researcher discovered something in the archives, it's usually because they read our finding aid, which pointed them to it. I'm going to step off that soapbox and go back to the document and just point out multiple times in this document from 1949, it uses this phrase, both races, which, in the context, it's clear that they mean white people and black people. And for the time period, it makes total sense. And for a lot of the 20th century, in America, especially in Virginia, if you were talking about race, if you were talking about diversity, all it meant was black people and white people. Like, diversity was, do you have enough black people? Eventually that also was, do you have enough women? And then like it grew over time, but for lots of the 20th century, if somebody was talking about diversity, like if you go to the 1980s and pull up, we have a publication here that was a Virginia Tech newsletter that's called the Diversity News. The only stories in it are about the Black employees and students at Virginia Tech. There were other people, like there were Asian students and Latino students, and like the other populations were here. But the Diversity News did not pay any attention to them because the word diversity at that time was used to refer to affirmative action and equal opportunity in the context of Black people and women. So here, because this is looking specifically at tuberculosis in the Black population, and then they're talking about needing to address, they talk about needing to address tuberculosis in both races in order to eradicate it. They're only considering Black people and white people. They're not even, it doesn't appear that it even enters their mind that other people outside those two categories could possibly have tuberculosis and need services. It just was not part of the discourse or consciousness at the time. It's just, sorry, that phrase really struck me when I read it. It was like, huh. And I have been doing what I typically do and substituting the word that they're using here to refer to the Black population is not a word that is acceptable for use today. It is a historical term, and it is not in this document being used in any way that is intended as derogatory. It's just, at the time, that would have been like the educated person's word to refer to this population. So, okay, I'm going to dive back into the history but I think this is interesting. The task of getting people interested in this problem was by no means an easy one, as the majority of people were very skeptical about whether the Black people would accept treatment even if a sanatorium was built for them. However, after months of much opposition and many discouraging experiences, Dr. Williams and Miss Randolph, with the loyal support of the Negro Organization Society, that is the official name of that organization. So that's, yeah. The State National Tuberculosis Associations succeeded in persuading the state legislature to make an appropriation in 1916 to purchase a tract of land and build a small hospital for the treatment of tuberculosis among the Black residents of the state. Several desirable locations were investigated, but had to be rejected because of the objection of the civilian population of their respective communities. NIMBY! I love the formatting here. People were afraid of tuberculosis, therefore did not want the institution in their community. I suspect that the reason it is written this way is because reading this and hearing that they identified potential locations and the local community was highly opposed to having the facility there, which is NIMBY, which is the NIMBY, not in my backyard. If they stopped there and just said because the civilian population didn't want it in their community, it could be inferred that it was because it was a hospital for Black people. I think that's why they wanted to avoid that conclusion being drawn. I think that's why they point out here and say people were afraid of tuberculosis. Not that I think that's to try and drive home that it wasn't because it was a hospital for Black people. It's because it was tuberculosis, which I could be wrong, but that's how I read that. Some opposition was encountered at Burkeville, but after a very thorough investigation and several meetings with the citizens of the community, it was finally decided that the state would be allowed to purchase the land 1 mile east of Burkeville. The main reasons the committee reported their choice of this particular site was the general accessibility, labor, climate, and transportation facilities being adequate, as the Norfolk and Western and Southern railroads passed through Burkeville. So railroad connection was important, this being the mid-1910s. Also, the property was bordered by the main state highway from Richmond to Danville. This location was in the center of that portion of the state containing the largest population of Black people. A portion of the 310 acres of land was already cleared, and there was a small farmhouse and barn on same. The first person employed was a farm manager and dairyman, Mr. Herman Shute of Burkeville. The first person employed by the hospital was a farm manager and dairyman. He purchased thoroughbred cattle, started the dairy, raised hay for the cattle, vegetables, which were canned and made ready for the use of the patients when the sanatorium was completed. He also supervised the clearing of the land for the building of the sanatorium. I guess when building a hospital where there wasn't one before, the first thing to do is get the cows out of the way. Key squared, I guess. I mean, they were building it. Oh, you have it precisely backwards. Yeah, no. I I guess because it already had a farmhouse, they hired him to manage the farm because they wanted to keep the farm as part of the hospital complex. The first thing to do is get the cows in the way, apparently. Yeah. I think that that's actually quite interesting. I somewhat surprised by that. Approximately 1 year later, a small 25-bed pavilion had been completed and furnished with the barest necessities. The bedside tables, chairs, lockers, etc., were made out of pine lumber by the carpenters on the place. A small brick administration building to house a small heating plant, storerooms and laundry in the basement, kitchen, patient's dining room, and 2 small offices on the first floor and the second floor was divided into 2 apartments for the staff and the other for the ward helpers. No nurses were available at that time. While we continue with the history, I'm actually going to find the pictures so that we can observe pictures. The document is interesting, but there are pictures. Also, I do want to make sure that I remember that we need to before the end of stream, we have to look at Adventures in a Wheelchair. Don't let me forget Adventures in a Wheelchair. Oh. Well, this isn't a photograph of the building, but it is a photograph. Let me see quickly if there's any information. At the moment, there is not, but it's a staff photograph. And you can see they're all white. Not terribly surprising that, but oh, hello, welcome in, Whimsies. Hi, 16-bit Eric. Welcome. It is great to have you here. I hope the end of your stream went well. Hi, Pretty Witchery. Hi. I'm Rogan27, aka Anthony Wright Day Hernandez. I'm the Community Collections Archivist at Virginia Tech. And this is the once a week show where we look at materials from the special collections and university archives and learn things. And today we're looking at materials from the Piedmont Tuberculosis Sanatorium, which was the first hospital for Black patients in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it opened in the 19-teens. And so we're taking a look at that. Hi, Blue Rooster. The color contrast, I could barely make out your name. And hi, Shadows of Life, thank you for the bit. Yeah, everything is tuberculosis. I had no idea that's... I did not know about that book until Bast Insider brought it up. So right now we're doing taking a look at some like general overview history of the facility, and then we'll probably look at the they were the first place to train Black people as nurses in Virginia. So we'll probably look at some of that. And then also, there's a story in here called Adventures in a Wheelchair. And so I want to find out what that's about. I was looking for a picture to share with you all, but there aren't a lot of pictures in here. There's this photograph of staff, and they are all white. Ooh, we do have a postcard of the sanatorium. And a picture of the administration building. Oh, there's another postcard. Sepia tone one of the infirmary building, I think. We did just get... Wait, what? Also, Fluidan, thank you so much for the resubscription. 27 months. Oh, the aspect counter? The aspect counter is a permanent feature of the stream now. If we encounter an aspect, that number will change. we encounter aspects so often that having an aspect counter seemed appropriate. So I was wanting to just give you all some images while I continue on with the general history of the sanatorium. Aspic. Oh, Wannabe Sayuri. Aspic. It's like mimics in the dungeon. Exactly. Aspic's in the archives. Aspic is, yeah, meat gelatin. It's like Jello, but made with meat fat. Duck in aspic is often the go-to where you've got, and it's served cold because it's gelatin, and in order for it to be jelly, it has to be cold. If you warm it up, it's going to melt. So you end up with cold roast duck encased in a shell of duck-flavored gelatin. We do have a fantastic food history collection. And, you know, because we have discussed it. The question is it going to work? Apparently not. Now I'm going to have to find out. It is not a stream if something doesn't break. All right. I don't know what happened. I don't know why the command is broken. But there. Oh, no, the command just didn't work at all. I don't know why. The post was me clicking on test the command. No idea. Anyway, so we've been reading up on the history. The first employee hired was a farm manager and dairyman for this medical facility intended for the treatment of tuberculosis in the Black population of the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's a savory gelatin, yeah, pretty witchery. I'm going to return to reading some history here, just because I can't digress for too long because it's a short stream. Piedmont Sanatorium was formerly opened. They mean formally. Piedmont Sanatorium was formally opened on April 22nd, 1918, and the first patient, Mary Page Cook of Emporia, Virginia, was admitted on April 28th. She remained in the sanatorium 4 weeks. The records show that many of the patients at that time did not remain in the sanatorium very long, some for just a few hours or days. However, they continued to report promptly when notified. It seems the general complaint of the patients at that time was too much fresh air and homesickness. It is interesting to note that many of those who stayed only a few days at first applied for readmission later on their own accord. Yeah, this is well before, like, we're past the point where HIPAA is a concern with these documents, but also it was pre-HIPAA. So they didn't have any concerns when they wrote the documents. So they created this hospital, and people were sent there, and apparently checked themselves out, even though they weren't done with treatment, because there was too much fresh air, or they were homesick. For anyone who is not familiar, we looked at it earlier on, but tuberculosis was sometimes called the White Death, and also sometimes often actually referred to as consumption. And it has been with the human race since ancient history. I personally like the I have TB, so I'm going west version of sanatorium. And sanatorium, this is a tuberculosis sanatorium, so it's a hospital. It's a convalescent home for people with tuberculosis. It is not the meaning of it is not a sanitarium, which is a kind of sanatorium that became like a variation on the word that became very much associated with mental hospitals in the mid 20th century. By September 1918, the experiment was proving to be a success, and Miss Gillum and Dr. Carter outlined a course of study for nurses. And the first class of the Piedmont Sanatorium Training School for Nurses started with an enrollment of 2 students, Janie Walker of Norfolk, Virginia, and Grace Watts of Portsmouth, Virginia. Since that date, a 2-year course in tuberculosis nursing, with the privilege of going to a general hospital for 1-year affiliation to become a registered nurse, has been offered to young Black women meeting the requirements of the school. The school has always been on the accredited list and approved by the State Board of Nurses examiners. To date, we have graduated 179 nurses, practically all of whom have taken the 3rd year and are graduate registered nurses. This was written in 1949. So that's 41 years that they had been running the nursing school when this was written. This was the first training school to be established in the United States solely for the training of young Negro women in tuberculosis nursing. There are a number of qualifiers in that sentence. And yes, historical terms. I read it. I didn't substitute it. So there are historical terms, and they appear on the documents, and I try to correct them as I go, and sometimes I don't manage to. But first in the US solely for training young Black women in tuberculosis nursing. Yeah, no, this, and it's not meant in a derogatory way in this document. It's just, that is the term that would have been used in 1949 by an educated person to refer to the Black community. It's just not a term we use today. So not necessarily the first for training Black women, not necessarily the first in the US only for training Black women, but it was the first in the US only for training Black women in tuberculosis nursing. A very oddly specific school, yes. It was also in September 1918 that Miss Agnes D. Randolph, on behalf of the State Anti-Tuberculosis Association, known now as the Virginia Tuberculosis Association, offered to give $5,000 for the construction of a second pavilion, provided the State Board of Health would complete it. This generous gift was accepted, and by July 1919, the Moten building for male patients was completed, increasing the capacity of the sanatorium to 65. This building was named for Dr. Robert A. Moten, referred to in the beginning of this history. He was one of the people who started the push towards getting the sanatorium created. If you want to know more about Moten, there is a website, or there's a museum, actually, the Moten Museum, which is not about this, but about a school named after him. It is very mid-century. $5,000 to build a building in a hospital complex. And that was a generous donation that would cover the cost of building the building. Yeah, it snuck up on us, the ads. Sorry. Lord Portico, thank you. Okay, let's see. The original building, which had been called the Agnes Randolph Building for Ms. Randolph, was then used for female patients. An operating room with one corner equipped for laboratory work was built on the new pavilion. This is huge because this is the before, for those of you who arrived a little bit later, prior to this institution, the only place that a Black person suffering with tuberculosis could get treatment in Virginia was the Central State Hospital for the Insane or the State Penitentiary. And so having a facility that was specifically dedicated to treating this medical condition for this population was huge. We did encounter, the author of this refers to needing to address tuberculosis in both races in order to eradicate it from the state. Both races. As if there were no other people in Virginia. In November 1919, the National Tuberculosis Association, through the efforts of Dr. Dean B. Cole, president of the State Anti-Tuberculosis Association, donated $2,500 for occupational therapy work at Piedmont, and a teacher was immediately employed. From that time until April 1945, we continuously had the services of a trained occupational therapist. However, since the resignation of Mrs. Hattie Taylor of Kenbridge, Virginia, on the above date, after 22 years of service, we have not had a teacher. But since June 1947, through the efforts of Mr. Harold McGee, Director of Rehabilitation for the Virginia Tuberculosis Association, donations have been made by the local organizations for an occupational and recreation fund. Materials have been purchased and sold to the patients as low-priced as possible in order to keep the fund rotating. This, and the instructions to the patients in the various handcrafts, is being carried on by the volunteer services of 4 employees and a member of the staff. Movie projector has been purchased. Films are rented and movies are shown to the patients at least once a week. This is in the context of like an annual report type thing, but it's a history of the institution. So in 1921, additions were added to both of the pavilions, and the capacity of the institution increased to 98 beds. The first X-ray equipment was installed during this year in a room built onto the side of the Randolph building. A larger space was made available for the laboratory equipment at that time. An appropriation was granted by legislature in 1922 for the first wing of an infirmary building for strictly bed patients. And there were also classrooms for the training school, large operating room, larger X-ray room, laboratory, examining rooms, and new equipment was purchased at that time. This is the infirmary building. An appropriation was granted by the... Oh, sorry. That's what I just read. This was completed and occupied by the latter part of 1923, and it was at this time dental equipment was installed, and Dr. Fred D. Morton, state dentist, started coming to the institution periodically to care for the dental needs of the patients. So it's called the Piedmont Tuberculosis Sanatorium, and it's founded to treat tuberculosis. But even by 1923, they're adding services. They're growing into a more general hospital, which incidentally, the term general hospital, because this was a tuberculosis sanatorium, it was a hospital for the treatment of tuberculosis. A general hospital is a hospital for the treatment of whatever medical conditions show up. and so they've added dental equipment and rooms for convalescent patients that need, like, general hospital. Yeah. Also in 1922, a small nurses' home was completed. This is back when when you worked on a campus and you were part of the staff, you just had a house as part of your employment. Not for the treatment of generals, no. Although, I mean, I'm sure generals could have been treated at a general hospital. Oh, hold on. Yes, you do indeed, Bastion Cider. The question is, do you know the proper format to phrase it? Do I know the proper format to phrase it? It should be exclamation point, pun points, space, add, space, the username, and then the amount, I think. I don't know. We can make it work somehow. Sorry. Also in 1922, a small nurses' home was completed. An old wooden barrack building moved to Piedmont from Camp Lee was remodeled for this purpose. And when the nurses moved from the apartment in the administration building, this left much needed space for the staff and for the offices, which were moved upstairs, and the old offices remodeled to enlarge the patient's dining hall. Oh, close. Very close. Yeah, it needs the S. I think the ad goes before the username, though. You know, it's complicated. I'll double check. Yeah, it does have the S. I need to fix that. I'm not going to fix it right now. Yeah, it's command, then add, then the username, then the amount. I just need to go in later and make sure that without the S is an option. The patients have had religious services at Piedmont since the opening date. At first, they met regularly in the patient's dining hall. Later in 1922, the Piedmont Welfare Board was organized for the spiritual and moral welfare of the patients and employees of the institution, and in 1923, they requested permission to erect a chapel on the sanatorium grounds. By the combined efforts of the members of this board, the patients, staff, nurses, employees, and friends of the institution, $3,000 was collected and the chapel built and dedicated April 27th, 1924. $3,000 to build a chapel. And they don't mean to renovate a room inside an existing building. They mean to build a whole building. The late Mr. Charles E. Brower, for whom the chapel at Catawba Sanatorium is named, took an active interest in soliciting funds to build Piedmont Chapel. At present, 1949, there is a full-time religious worker at Piedmont whose salary is being paid by the Women's Missionary Society of the Baptist Churches of Southside Virginia. Mr. Emmett Frazier, director of the religious work in state institutions, visits the patients here every month. Local ministers frequently conduct services for the patients. Money went further then. Yeah. Also, in April of 1924, a club known as the Piedmont Mothers Club was organized through the combined efforts of the Superintendent of Nurses, Mrs. J.T. Steigerwald, and Mrs. Hattie Taylor, the occupational therapy teacher. The main purpose of this club was to raise money to purchase clothing and necessities for indigent patients and to provide special entertainment at frequent intervals for the amusement of the patients. This club is still functioning. Not today, but in 1949. They also started a library at time they organized, collecting about 800 books. It was about this time, too, that the Piedmont Sanatorium Glee Club was organized. And they made quite a reputation for themselves. They had the honor of being among the first singers to broadcast over WRVA on one of the station's opening programs. I'm curious as to whether WRVA still exists. It is now a news radio AM station in Richmond, but it is still in operation. A Mother's Club is either incredibly useful or borderline evil. There's no middle ground. I think it's quite interesting, like going back and reading about this sanatorium, which the term sanatorium, we did glance at, and this is not a hospital in the sense that we think of today. It was a campus, an entire campus, a destination you go to in order to recover from illness. If anybody's seen the movie Cure for Wellness, that takes place at a sanatorium. You go there and you stay there and you're a guest there while you're receiving treatment for a condition. It is not a place like a modern hospital where you check in for a procedure and they charge you for every night that you stay there. And it's, I mean, you probably paid something to be there, but it was more homey. It was more community oriented. You weren't completely isolated and separated from everybody else that was there. You were there interacting with the other patients, interacting with the staff, like a rehab center. Exactly, Castabras. It was more of a community, like intentional village designed for the treatment of something, as opposed to the modern hospital, which is very transactional. So the fact that they had things like the Mothers Club and a Glee Club, and they had all of this stuff, those were activities. Because if you engage the mind of the person while you're treating the body, there's a greater likelihood they're actually going to recover from the illness. Appropriation for the second wing of the infirmary building, which was started in 1922, was granted in 1924, and by March 1926, it had been completed and filled with patients. This addition of 22 beds increased the capacity of the sanatorium to 150 beds. Just a short time after this, April 10th to be exact, Dr. Carter, who had been the superintendent of the institution since it opened, died. The above building was named the Carter Building and dedicated in May of that year. From 1926 to March 1931, there were many changes in the personnel of the sanatorium. Improvements were made on the grounds and buildings, addition to the administration building in 1927 for offices, and much needed living quarters for the staff. Several houses were built for the employees, and some new equipment purchased during this period. Dr. J.B. Woodson of Lowesville, Virginia, former state senator, was appointed superintendent and medical director of the sanatorium in March 1931, and he remained in this capacity until he retired in April 1946. During the 15 years he remained here, he supervised the building of a new brick nurses' home, addition to the laundry, central heating plant, several homes for employees, new dairy barn, addition of bake shop, and refrigerating rooms to the kitchen. Running this complex is very akin to running a college campus or a company town. We've got stuff about the Freeze Textile Mill, and this sounds very much like Freeze, where the textile mill was the only employer. They owned the houses that the workers lived in. So when workers needed to talk to their landlord about having repairs done, those are in the ledgers of the textile mill because they were the landlord. And this is sort of a similar setup where it's like a company town. The capacity of the sanatorium remained at 150 from 1926 to 1940, when a new concrete steel fireproof constructed building was completed. Classrooms for the School of Nursing in basement, male patients first floor, female patients and new dental office second floor, and 40 beds for children and an entirely new hospital unit of operating rooms, x-ray, laboratory, examining rooms with all new and modern equipment, and this added 119 beds, increasing the capacity to 269. At the same time, an addition was added to the nurses' home to take care of the additional nurses needed to care for the extra patients. Upon the retirement of Dr. Woodson in 1946, Dr. Charles W. Scott, former state clinician for the State Department of Health and medical director at Piedmont since January 1st, 1942, was appointed superintendent and medical director. During the past 2 years, all necessary repairs have been made on all buildings, and these buildings painted inside and out. The grounds have been resoiled, and the lawns resown with grass, and cement walkways between the buildings constructed, the chapel remodeled, and many other improvements. An appropriation of over $1 million for the new nurses' home and additions to the present concrete infirmary building has been granted, and the work will be started on same in a short time now. Wow. The inflation. They built a chapel for $3,000 in 1924, was it? And in 1949, they appropriated $1 million to build the new nurses' home. $3,000, $1 million. Yes, the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, World War II all happened between those two prices. When completed, the entire hospital with all of its departments will be under one roof. This will increase the capacity to 350. From the very beginning, a tremendous amount of work has been done by the physicians at Piedmont for outside patients, both people of color and white. It does not say people of color. A large majority of our ex-patients return for periodical checkups and x-rays. Artificial pneumothorax has always been one of the routine forms of treatment when indicated, and the ex-patients of other institutions have been continuously referred to us for this treatment when they have been returned to their homes in the vicinity of the sanatorium. Many of our own ex-patients also return for pneumothorax refills. Okay, so I think we need to know what is artificial pneumothorax. I do not know. I'm going to look it up. Let's see what I can learn here. All right, NIH, give me a brief overview. I just want a brief overview, please. Maybe Science Direct can get me. Sounds like a Dracolich arch-villain, but almost certainly is not. If a patient has a large pleural effusion, thank you for the use of jargon. Pleural effusion is a pathologic collection of fluid between the visceral and parietal pleura in the thoracic cavity. If they have a fluid buildup between their organs and muscles inside the main trunk of their body. Please correct me if I got any of that wrong. And do not take medical advice from this stream. This stream is not for medical use. If a patient has a large pleural effusion, the chances of causing damage to the lung itself during the port and scope introduction are remote. However, without real-time ultrasound imaging, it is almost impossible to discern whether portions of the lung may be abnormally adherent to the pleura, or how extensive diaphragmatic excursion may be. Many patients who require a medical pleuroscopy do not have enough fluid to allow confident, safe access to the safe triangle while in the lateral decubitus position, which means additional precautions must be taken. This is the brief overview These precautions have historically involved the creation of a pneumothorax by the introduction of air through a blunt needle before the procedure. But this process can be time-consuming. Okay, pneumothorax. A simple pneumothorax is a collection of air arising from leakage of air from an injured lung into the pleural space. So, yeah, try not to take 80-year-old medical advice in general. If you have medical needs, please consult a qualified medical professional. So they were, once people had undergone initial treatment, the doctors at Piedmont also provided follow-up treatments for former patients, whether those were former patients of Piedmont or another medical facility. And they treated both the Black population and the white population when doing those follow-ups. So even though the institution was created for the treatment of tuberculosis in the Black population, they were providing this pneumothorax procedure in follow-up appointments to anyone who needed it who was physically located near the facility. All forms of chest surgery have been used in the treatment of the patients here when indicated. The minor operations have been performed here by doctors E.C. Drash and Larry White of the University of Virginia Hospital, but the patients are sent to the University Hospital for the major operations. These too have been performed by the above-named surgeons. In the early days, Dr. Frank S. Johns of Richmond, Johnston Willis Hospital, did the surgical work for us. All of the new and approved drugs have been used in the treatment of the patients here, and our records show some very splendid results from the use of the latest of these, streptomycin. Since April 1918 through June 1948, 30 years, 7,568 patients have been treated in this institution, and the attached statistics will show some interesting results concerning these patients. Most of those who blazed the way for the work at Piedmont have passed on. But there can hardly be any doubt left in the minds of their most skeptical adversaries of 1918. Piedmont Sanatorium for the treatment of tuberculosis in the Black population is a success. It does not say the Black population. It again uses a historic term. A very brief history of Piedmont Sanatorium was not very brief. I mean, it was, but we digress a lot. I don't mind that we digress because we learn things. That said, we have about a half an hour remaining, and I need to know what is Adventures in a Wheelchair? I need to know. We could look closer at the pictures. We could look at the articles about the founding of, or the creation of educational opportunities for Black women to become nurses in the mid-19-teens in Virginia. But we have a thing here called Adventures in a Wheelchair. I need to know. Hopefully you'll join me too. Adventures in a Wheelchair by Mrs. Bessie Caitlin Howard, deceased. Charles P. Howard, executor. So, does that mean he was instructed to publish this after her death? That's what I take from it, but I don't know. Adventures in a Wheelchair. What a... I'm curious, is there a date? I don't see one. I start reading and immediately get distracted. It does appear to be undated. Let's find out if I can find anything. Just quickly. I was hoping not to have to use the tool that I know could get me something, but I don't know. I'm not going to dig into it right now. Based on the paper, the staples, the font from the typewriter, I'm going to guess this is also 1940s era, but I could be off by a decade or so. If we knew when Mrs. Howard died, that might give us a better general idea, but sometimes those can be easy to find and sometimes not. And I'm not going to do it now because we have limited time. Adventures in a Wheelchair. What a stir of organization there is in the air. How the whole heart of the nation seems vibrating and quivering with purpose. Every trade, every craft, every factory, every profession is busy with its code. Only one group fails to appear in the picture. Suppose we invalids, we shut-ins, we handicapped could organize. Suppose we could hold conventions where experiences were exchanged, suggestions made for a more efficient handling of our problems, enthusiastic speeches delivered regarding the fact that we are really not shut in, and community meetings held with a plan for help to those more hopeless than ourselves. If the role could be called in retreats for incurables, hateful word, hospitals and private homes, what wealth of material we should find for service on our committees. How many eligibles for our offices? And those of us who belong to the everyday prosaic class who have no special ability might be inspired to do many things which now seem impossible. Might, in spite of our handicaps, find opportunities for service, now undreamed of. Chances to play the game, which would help to make our days more fruitful. Well, of course, such an organization is but a dream. Yet it may be possible for me to communicate with a few of my fellow sufferers, and they in turn may get in touch with a few others, and so a helpful chain could be formed of those of us who want to do our part in trying to encourage each other. After all, there are many beneficent byproducts of invalidism, of which it is well for us to remind ourselves constantly. I find leisure quite an adventure. In the old days, I madly dashed around, spending time so rapidly. It rarely seemed to be in my grasp. Now I have 60 minutes in every hour, and they are mine to do with as I please. Time to read in luxurious peace. Time to gather certain little blossoms of life, which formerly I was too busy to notice. Time to take excursions with my own thoughts. Time to absorb the bewitching beauties of nature and study the bewildering variety of humankind. I am so fortunate as to live high up in a sort of watchtower with a glorious vista of woods and hills and sky to the west, spreading out like a curtain before me. The contour of these hills seems constantly changing, depending upon the slant of the sunlight, or the clinging veils of mist, Frequently above them appear masses of clouds, which so perfectly represent distant mountain ranges that even an old-timer like myself is deceived by the mirage. In the evening, the skyline is often decorated by such gorgeous groups of castles on towering cliffs, such bastions and turrets, and other characteristics of medieval architecture that I am tempted to pity the tired tourist who, guidebook in hand, conscientiously plods from one European showplace to another. Speaking of travel, consider the journeys I have taken by books during the past few years, over many of the unbeaten paths on the Earth's surface. The very mention of yak butter, in imagination, brings to my nostrils the odor of that delectable delicacy of the Gobi Desert. Scrambled ostrich eggs are no novelty, and the thought of broiled locusts arouses neither surprise nor resentment in my gastronomic interior. African drums are familiar sounds, and the grunt of a lion almost as commonplace as the jangling of a midnight streetcar. I have encountered many evils and shared many and shared many joys and triumphs with many adventurers. The records of their experiences delight me, and their ambitions find sympathetic response in my soul. To them all, I wave a grateful and fraternal greeting. Friends mean more to an invalid than the well realize. Yet here our handicap presents itself, for we cannot go out and make friends. We have no way, except by letter, of holding those who grow cold or indifferent. No matter how much we may admire and long for the companionship of certain persons, we have no opportunities for casual and frequent association. All initiative must come from them. But when they do respond to our telepathic call, we marvel and rejoice. Naturally, I expected the old friends of long ago to rally around me in this crisis, and faithful and devoted they have been. I had not anticipated, however, that this situation would bring to me new friends. But it has. This fact I count among my compensating adventures. So among the valuable byproducts of my invalidism, I am able to count several new but very real friends. Among these is my flower friend. During 2 years, I have been the sole beneficiary of her small garden, from the time of the appearance of the first brave crocus until the final farewell of the last hardy chrysanthemum. Long branches of forsythia and later peach and apple were brought to me when only tiny brown buds gave any promise of future glory, but which the warmth of the house soon coaxed into their normal beauty, making of my room a bower of springtime loveliness. Many women are generous in every respect save one. They cannot risk the impairment of the beauty of their garden by the gift of even a few buds. Not so my friend. Though her passion for flowers burns with an intense glow, she has deprived herself during all this time in order that I might be happy. No smallest blossom is born to blush unseen in her garden, for immediately upon its appearance, it is whisked away for my delectation. Spice pinks, citron, aloes, heliotrope. Now my nose rejoices at the mere mention. What dear memories of long ago are brought me by forget-me-nots, and lilies of the valley, bleeding hearts and larkspurs. I pause between the words with loving thoughts as a child loiters over the last sweet morsel of a candy box. Of course, my practical side tells me that it is a frequent application of ice cubes, which cause them to stay fresh such an unbelievably long time, but my romantic side whispers that perhaps they realize my love and are trying to reward me. While I linger over their arrangement in bowl or vase, studying just which receptacle will best become them, I touch their exquisite velvety petals with adoration, inhaling their spicy fragrance and reveling in their marvelous fragile beauty. It seems more than probable that I am experiencing an enjoyment beyond that of the average owner of a show garden. My globe-trotting friend pities my narrow life, but if she has become so accustomed to strange sights and sounds that boredom is ever with her, while my soul sings a paean over a spray of flowers or a sunset, am I not the more fortunate of the two? She does not see how I can endure this inaction, and says that with her nervous, highly wrought temperament, she could not bear it. What she considers my stolidity is, in my eyes, one of the compensations of this situation. I am wondering if it does not come to all invalids as an illustration of how the wind is tempered to the shorn lamb. For instance, on a bleak, rainy day when others hurry out of the office, or to a bridge club, or a shopping expedition, I curl up cozily in a big chair, or on the sofa, and with the companionship of a favorite book, rejoice in my blessed restfulness. Even on brilliant days, when the sky and earth are singing in their beauty, I feel no special longing for pastures new, because if I were dashing across the country, I would be very, very tired. Whereas now, as I rest in a steamer chair on the porch, with my view spread out before me, I am happy, as I think how the heavens declare the glory of God, the firmament showeth his handiwork. That some of our days are monotonous is undeniable, but who escapes boredom altogether? Housewives and teachers, laborers and businessmen pass through periods of weariness with the treadmill. Though we invalids have monotony, we can also have adventures. Trivial perhaps in the eyes of others, but valuable to us. Let us be on the lookout for them. They are well worth collecting. What greater adventure than the miracle of radio? It has practically eliminated from the language that distressful word, shut in. My unique adventure occurred at a sanatorium where it was necessary to spend much time in bed on a sleeping porch. One of my first realizations on arriving, among complete strangers, was the necessity for forming friendships as quickly as possible. The opportunities were necessarily limited, but with an eye open for friends, I promptly recognized in the senior doctor an excellent prospect. Before any matters of symptoms were discussed, he delighted me with accounts of the intelligence of his Airedale pup and the numerous customers at his bird lunch counter. Then I knew we need not waste time getting acquainted, for with this foundation of mutual love for animals and birds, our friendship was assured. He told me that during all his years at the hospital, he had known only one patient who availed himself of the exceptional opportunities for studying and making friends with birds. Thus was the scene set for my adventures, which brought me many hours of thrilling interest and remain among the happiest of memories. The menus at my cafeteria were limited, but met with instant approval from intrepid chickadees. In the beginning, a daily change of location was made. First, the nut crumbs being placed on the sleeping porch railing, then on the foot of the bed, then nearer and nearer my face. In a surprisingly short time, several little tufts of down were fearlessly using my chest for a table, and the number grew rapidly until a flock of 12 or 15 became regular guests. I am sorry to say that no other varieties of birds came to me, but my intimacy with the chickadee increased to such an extent that I felt neither need nor desire for other bird friends. The routine of hospital life is governed with clock-like precision. Of this fact, the chickadee soon became aware. Exactly at 8:30 each morning, I came to my sleeping porch with minced nuts for their breakfast. Whether their watches were apt to be fast, or whether they deemed it prudent to allow ample time for possible traffic jams or other unforeseen delays, I do not know. But certain it is that 5 or 10 minutes before the appointed hour, they commenced assembling, so that by 8:30 all my guests were on the bed, hopefully watching me through the glass door leading to the sitting room. If my appearance were delayed for even a few seconds, there arose such a protest of irritation and indignation that I hurried out with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. Immediately, the querulous notes ceased and were succeeded by a chorus of affectionate greetings. All the little wings dragged on the bed, every little mouth was opened, and each chickadee advanced to meet me, just as it would have done had I been the mother bird. After scattering the nuts all over the counterpane, I would get into bed, disarranging the covers with what must have seemed to them the upheaval of an earthquake, but they paid no more attention than if it had been the swaying of their nests in a breeze. To have them perch on my fingers while eating crumbs from my palm became such a daily occurrence that I hardly realized the significance. But I never failed to experience a tingling ecstasy when one alighted on my chin and ate nuts from my lips. There was no indication that they considered this in any way remarkable. It was simply a different manner of serving breakfast. The morning meal was the only time at which they seemed to expect refreshments. For the rest of the day, they came, 1 or 2 or 3 at a time, apparently just for the pleasure of my company, dropping by as a busy friend might do for a few moments' chat. They soon discovered that my woolen hood was a comfortable spot on which to rest while rearranging their apparel, that my reading needed careful supervision, and my correspondence must be censored while reading a letter. The lower edge of the sheet resting on my chest, I frequently felt a gentle tap tap from the other side. As I slowly raised the paper, a mischievous little head peeped from beneath. Surely the merry eyes smiled up at me as I smiled down at them. When spring came and I grew well enough to dress and sit on the porch, my watercolor box created endless amusement. The chickadees pranced about among the paints, sampling some, rearranging the brushes, and even nonchalantly following the movements of the brush as I sketched, much as a kitten enjoys playing with a ball. Often, when the doctor came for his daily rounds and found me absorbed with my birds, he smiled at us through the glass door and went on his way, realizing that these little friends were probably ministering to me in a more efficacious manner than would be possible for him. How I loved my chickadees, and what a pleasure, comfort, and real physical benefit they were to me. There is nothing unique about my gray squirrel companions, for we are all familiar with the friendly charm of these little residents on our city parks. There is this difference, however. My squirrels came to me directly from the woods. 10 o'clock seemed to be their preferred hour for breakfast. About that time, the dean of the corps crossed from a neighboring tree to my porch on a telephone wire, balancing with his tail in expert tightrope walker technique. Before he finished his meal, some 4 or 5 others would be waiting on the railing, but it was evidently entirely contrary to etiquette for anyone to get on the bed until Graybeard had departed. If some overly hungry or ignorant individual essayed to approach me out of turn, he was greeted by the one already at table with such a torrent of bitter and vituperative language that he retreated hurriedly, much humiliated. One morning during my convalescence, while walking near the sanatorium, I saw a squirrel studying me with such an unusually intent and questioning manner that I called, "Can that be my little Graybeard?" Instantly, he bounded to me with what I interpreted as a greeting of apology for not having recognized me in this strange upright position and unusual garb. Uh, I need just a pause for some liquid here. I also want to make sure that we don't get invaded by additional advertisements, which I should be able to prevent if I can just find it. Hello. I don't know. I don't see the button. Anyway, I will attempt to pause them later. There should be a button right there. Well, we may get hit with them again toward the end of stream, and I apologize if we do, but I'll have to fix that. For now, this story is amazing. This account is amazing. I am really enjoying this. It is not at all what I was expecting. 2 or 3 feet of snow remained on the ground all that winter, enabling me to prove whether squirrels can find hidden nuts under such conditions. I often saw a squirrel go to a certain spot and dig straight down with no apparent hesitation or uncertainty, popping up every few seconds to be sure no enemy was approaching. It was all done with a manner so methodical and businesslike that his final reappearance with a nut in his mouth seemed in no way remarkable. Months ago, he had put his treasure in a safe deposit box. Now he wanted it and got it. Why should obtuse mortals be surprised? Happily for me, a certain Mr. and Mrs. Squirrel, with their young son, chose the big oak close to my porch for a playground. Or rather, training ground. Such games of hide and seek, follow your leader, tag, and racing. Baby is always kept in the nest until nearly full grown, but I could distinguish him by the downiness of his coat, the large eyes and ears, and the fact that he invariably occupied the most prominent position. He thought he was playing, but the parents, though enjoying the fun, knew he was being trained in sure-footedness, ingenuity, self-reliance, and swiftness. When Junior, hard-pressed in a race, for the first time resorted to the trick of running out on a limb too small to bear the heavier weight of his pursuers, I felt certain of an expression of complacence on the faces of his parents. And did he taunt and crow over them? He certainly did. The older squirrels were fleeter than he, but they evidently reduced their pace to his limitations, for he was allowed to win frequently, but not invariably. Often when one of them was almost ready to tag, he dodged suddenly under the limb, and they, passing on, gave him a chance to start in the opposite direction. Of course, this is the common practice of squirrels at play, but the humorous mischief of their antics often caused me to laugh aloud, and moreover, there was a delightful sense of partnership when I realized that I was in their home, as it were, sharing with them the intimacy of everyday life. This combination of education and recreation went on in the old oak for hours that spring, watched by only 2 pair of eyes, mine, gleeful and curious, and Mrs. Scarlet Tanager's, calm but watchful, as she sat on her nest. In addition to my enjoyment of visitors, it has been interesting to study the variety of their methods. Each one wishes to bring cheer and consolation, but the approach to that goal is from surprisingly different angles. The buoyant friend reels off jokes in quick succession, while the gloomy one, wishing to distract my thoughts from my own troubles, recites an appalling list of illnesses, accidents, and sudden deaths. But all agree that I have improved wonderfully since they last saw me. This is an encouraging thought, and one with which I am loath to dispense, yet I often think that if I had gained as much as is represented, by this time I would be an irresistible combination of Helen Moody and the Venus of Milo. From friends, our thoughts naturally turn to letters, those happy, healing messages whereby absent loved ones seem close at hand. If the strong, in the affluence of their health, could understand the blessing letters bring to the sick, our postal rates might be lowered and the department continue self-supporting. In some instances, letters are even more beneficial than visits, for the latter are not always auspiciously timed, nor are they invariably soothing. But a letter can be saved until the time is favorable, and it can be thrown away if it proves uninteresting. In the realm of letter writing, the invalid often meets the well person on an equality. In fact, he may have somewhat the advantage due to more leisure. The therapeutic value of occupation is too well known to need comment, except to say that rarely are fingers too stiff or minds too dull to make something that someone can enjoy. Hobbies are essential. I ride mine with the enthusiasm and exhilaration of youth and health. One of the sinister problems with which an invalid has to contend is the temptation to self-pity. That little demon whispers persistently, and the sound grows ever louder as we listen to him, till there is danger of his clamor deafening us to the sweet melodies of life and all the many voices pleading for compassion and help. The quiet room of an invalid can, and often does, become a haven of rest for afflicted souls. A letter from an invalid can, and often does, carry encouragement to those actively engaged in life's battles. To all invalids, I wave a fraternal salute. We may not form an organization, but we can agree to think with understanding sympathy of the heavy laden whatever. We may not form an organization, but we can agree to think with understanding sympathy of the heavy laden whatever their burdens may be. It is not necessary for us to be happy, but it is necessary to hold fast to love and faith and courage. Amazing. Amazing. And having had pet birds in the past, they weren't chickadees, but reading her account of having the birds come and visit, it's like having pet birds. And just the joy that was in it. I did not expect that. I didn't quite know what to expect. It's giving Disney Princess. It is very much giving Disney Princess. It's well written. It's creative. I wasn't sure at first. I thought it might be like slightly... I was expecting that possibly it was going to be like a bit of sarcasm or... but no, it just is just amazing. I really do want to prevent the hang on, I'm trying to find a thing. This one. Why it disappeared and I need it to be there. Thank you very much. There. There's a button that you click to say, do not run an ad break. And you're limited to how many times you can do it, but I don't want an ad break to happen as we're ending. And the button had disappeared. Anyway, I thought this was amazing. I really just the brief history, the art, the postcards showing it, the history of it, the fact that it was really the first hospital for the treatment of medical conditions for Black people in Virginia. The fact that it was the first place that that any Black women were able to obtain education as nurses in Virginia. Like that, it's really interesting history. And so I think it's a great collection. There's so much in that tiny little box. And of course, we never have enough time. But hopefully it was interesting to all of you. It was very interesting to me. We can always look at more. I might end up doing blog posts about this collection. There might already be blog posts about this collection. I don't know. It's a good collection. And so thanks for joining me. I was your host. Thank you to Jules, my student assistant, who helped prepare the episode. Thank you, of course, to my moderators, Hannah and Lord Portico. I thought I had gotten the bots out of there, but whatever. Thank you for the resubscription, Fluid, and Lord Portico, thank you for gifting a sub. Shadows of Life, thank you for the bit. 16-bit Eric, thank you for the raid. And of course, we've been listening to music by Lo-Fi Girl. So we're gonna find somewhere to raid. I know I start every week by saying this is the weekly stream where we look at materials from the archives, which is in general true. However, I'm taking some vacation and there will not be an episode next week or the week after. So the next episode will be on July 16th. And I have no idea what it is. Yeah. The next episode will be July 16th. It will be episode 200. And it will be our first time taking a look at the diary of a Confederate teenager. Because we have a new journal to start. And so we're going to explore. It's a 14-year-old girl in Mississippi during the American Civil War. It is her diary, and we're going to take a look at it starting Wednesday, July 16th. I keep saying that, and I'm hoping that that is actually the correct date. Because nothing will actually show me a calendar at the moment. Yeesh. I'm going to double check, and then I will have, yes, July 16th. But we're going to set up a raid here. Let's see where we're going to go. So many things. No. I don't need noise. Thank you very much. All right, we've got, well, Stephen is on. Paleontologizing is on. I don't know. I think we're doing dinosaurs. At least for those watching on the Rogan 27 channel, we're gonna raid on over to paleontologizing. Sadly, I cannot make that happen for those on the B2L Studios channel. I wish I could, but I am unable to. So you all will be heading on over to Stephen Joy's, I think. Because I can't raid this channel from that channel, but I do like to pop on over and check out some dinosaur stuff. with paleontologizing. So if you're on the Rogan 27 channel, head on over there, say hi, learn some things. And for those of you on V2L Studios channel, we'll go and check out Stephen Joyce. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope that I will see all of you when I return mid-July. I hope this was interesting for you. Until I see you next, keep exploring history.